They laughed when she walked onto the range with her grandfather's rifle, until the first shot shattered every record on the board. The morning air at Fort Benning, Georgia, carried the weight of tradition and testosterone. It was the kind of place where legends were born and egos were either forged or shattered. The International Military Marksmanship Championship was not just a competition. It was a proving ground where the world's elite shooters came to claim dominance, to etch their names into the annals of military history. Sergeant Major William Bull Hartwick stood at the edge of the observation deck, his thick arms crossed over his barrel chest, watching as teams from 17 nations unpacked their equipment. British SAS, German KSK, Russian Spetsnaz, Israeli Sayeret Matkal. Every uniform told a story of blood, sweat, and uncompromising discipline. Another year, another circus. Bull muttered to his second-in-command, Captain Derek Moss, a lean man with wire-rimmed glasses and a reputation for being as calculating as he was cold. At least it keeps the politicians happy, Moss replied, scanning his tablet. Full roster this year. Even got some wild cards from smaller units trying to make a name. Bull grunted. Wild cards don't win championships. Discipline does. Training does. Bloodline does. That's when she arrived. The olive green pickup truck looked out of place among the military transports and official vehicles. It rolled to a stop near the registration tent, and out stepped a woman who seemed to carry the desert itself in her presence. She was 26 years old, with long black hair pulled back in a traditional braid that fell past her shoulders. Her skin was the color of red canyon stone kissed by endless sun, and her eyes, dark as obsidian, held a calmness that unnerved anyone who met her gaze. She wore faded jeans, a simple black tank top, and a weathered leather jacket that had seen more years than most recruits had seen service. Over her shoulder hung a rifle case that looked older than she was, wrapped in worn cloth decorated with geometric patterns in turquoise and red. Her name was Kai Yazi. She was Dene, Navajo from the Navajo Nation Reservation in northern Arizona, and she was about to turn the military world upside down. "Who the hell is that?" Moss asked, his eyes narrowing as he watched Kai approach the registration desk. Bull pulled out his roster sheet, scanning down the list. His finger stopped at the very bottom. Yazi Kai, U.S. Army Reserve, assigned to the 297th Infantry Regiment out of Alaska. He looked up, confusion creasing his weathered face. Alaska? What's an Alaska Reserve unit doing sending someone here? Probably a diversity checkbox, Moss said with a dismissive wave. You know how it is now, optics over outcomes. Bull didn't respond, but something in his gut twisted. He'd been in the military for 32 years. He'd seen combat in 3 wars, trained thousands of soldiers, and could spot a warrior from a mile away. And something about the way Kai moved, silent, centered, aware of everything around her without seeming to look, made him pause. At the registration tent, Kai handed her papers to Corporal Jamie Chen, a young administrator with a friendly smile. Yazi Kai, Jamie read aloud, typing into her computer. Okay, I've got you here. You're representing... Oh, this is interesting. You're an independent entry sponsored by the Army Reserve Special Programs Division. Yes, ma'am, Kai said quietly, her voice carrying the musical cadence of someone who grew up speaking another language first. And your primary weapon is... Jamie looked at the rifle case. A Winchester Model 70? Modified, Kai added. 1952 original. It was my grandfather's. Jamie's smile faltered slightly. Around them, other shooters were unpacking state-of-the-art precision rifles, Barrett MRAD systems, AI AX-50s, custom-built tactical weapons worth more than some cars. And here was this woman with a rifle older than most of their fathers. Well, Jamie said diplomatically, you'll need to have it inspected by the armory officials. But as long as it meets safety standards, you're cleared to compete. She handed over a credential badge and a welcome packet. Good luck out there. Thank you, Kai said, taking the materials and walking toward the range complex. Behind her, whispers began to spread like wildfire. Did you see that antique she's carrying? Is this a joke? Did someone sign up their grandmother? I heard she's from some reservation. Probably never even seen a modern rifle. This is embarrassing. The championship is becoming a charity event. Kai heard every word, She'd been hearing words like that her entire life. Growing up on the reservation, she'd been too traditional for some, not traditional enough for others. When she joined the Army Reserve at 19, seeking purpose after her grandfather's death, she'd been told repeatedly that girls didn't belong in combat arms, that Native Americans were better suited for support roles, that she should smile more, talk more, be more like everyone else. She'd learned to let the words slide off like rain on stone. Words didn't matter. Actions did. The armory inspection took place in a converted warehouse where weapons were cataloged, tested, and certified for competition use. Kai waited her turn, watching as shooters from various nations presented their high-tech equipment to the inspection team. When her name was called, she approached the table where 3 officials sat, a U.S. Army Master Sergeant, a civilian firearms expert, and a representative from the International Shooting Sports Federation. She carefully removed her rifle from its case. The Winchester Model 70 was a work of art. The walnut stock had been hand-carved with traditional Navajo symbols, mountains, cornstalks, and the 4 sacred directions. The metal had been maintained with such care that it gleamed despite its age. The scope was modern, a gift from her unit commander who'd recognized her potential, but everything else was original. "This is your competition weapon?" the Master Sergeant asked, his tone skeptical. "Yes, sir." He picked it up, examining it with the eye of someone who knew firearms intimately. Despite himself, he was impressed. The action was smooth, the barrel had been recently cleaned, and the overall condition was exceptional. "This is a beautiful rifle," he admitted, "but it's 73 years old. Have you considered that it might not have the precision consistency needed for this level of competition?" "It's never failed me, sir," Kai replied evenly. The civilian expert leaned forward. "Miss Yazzie, no disrespect intended, but the rifles being used in this championship can calculate windage, distance, temperature, and humidity automatically. They have electronic triggers, carbon fiber barrels, and can maintain sub-MOA accuracy at extreme distances. Your rifle, while beautiful, is fundamentally limited by its age and technology." Kai met his eyes. "My grandfather taught me that a rifle is only as good as the person holding it. Technology can assist, but it can't replace understanding. I know this weapon. I know how it breathes, how it reacts in heat and cold, in wind and stillness. I trust it because I've earned its trust." Silence fell over the inspection table. The Master Sergeant cleared his throat. "Well, it passes all safety requirements. You're cleared for competition." He handed her a certification sticker. "But I'll be honest with you, you're going to be up against the best shooters in the world using the best equipment in the world. I hope you're ready for that." "I am, sir," Kai said simply, taking her rifle and walking away. What none of them knew was that Kai Yazzie had been shooting since she was 6 years old. Her grandfather, Thomas Yazzie, had been a code talker in World War II, one of the Navajo Marines whose unbreakable language had helped win the Pacific Theater. After the war, he'd returned to the reservation, carrying memories he could never speak about, and skills he would pass down to his granddaughter. He'd taught her to shoot, not as sport, but as meditation, to breathe with the wind, to feel the earth beneath her, to understand that every shot was a conversation between the shooter and the world. He'd taught her patience, the kind of patience that came from ancestors who had survived centuries of displacement and still maintained their dignity. When Thomas died 3 years ago, Kai had been at his bedside. His last words to her were in Navajo. "Hojoji hidiu," walk in beauty, find balance in all things. She'd carried that teaching into everything she did. And now, standing on the edge of the most important competition of her life, she felt her grandfather's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. The preliminary rounds began the next morning. 200 shooters would be narrowed down to the top 32 over 3 days of qualifying rounds. The courses tested everything: precision at various distances, moving targets, stress shoots with time limits, environmental adaptation, and mental resilience. Kai drew lane 47 for the first qualification round, a precision shoot at 600 yards with 10 shots, scored on both accuracy and consistency. As she set up her position, she became aware of the spectators gathering. Word had spread about the Indian girl with the antique rifle, and people wanted to see the inevitable failure. Some were curious, some were sympathetic, but most were simply waiting for confirmation of their assumptions. In the observation tower, Bull Hartwick watched through binoculars, his jaw set. Next to him, Captain Moss was already typing notes into his tablet. "This should be educational," Moss said dryly. "Teaching moment on why equipment standards exist." Bull said nothing, but something in his chest tightened as he watched Kai settle into her shooting position. There was something about her stillness, the way she seemed to become part of the earth itself, the way she breathed in rhythm with the wind. The range officer's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "Shooters, you may commence when ready. 10 shots, 600 yards, wind currently 4 miles per hour from the east. You have 12 minutes. Around Kai, shooters began settling into position, adjusting their high-tech scopes, checking their wind meters and ballistic computers. Kai simply closed her eyes. She felt the wind on her face, heard the way it moved through the grass at the target line, sensed the subtle shift in air pressure that meant it would strengthen slightly in the next 30 seconds. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind. "The wind is alive, Shiaji. It will tell you its secrets if you listen." She opened her eyes, shouldered her rifle, and found her natural point of aim. Her first shot broke like glass, smooth, inevitable, perfect. 600 yards away, the target registered a hit in the X-ring, dead center. In the observation tower, Bull's binoculars dropped slightly. "What the—" Kai didn't rush. She breathed, assessed, adjusted for the slight wind increase she'd anticipated. Her second shot followed the same ritual: stillness, breath, pressure, break. Another X-ring hit. By her fourth shot, the whispers had stopped. By her seventh shot, shooters in adjacent lanes were glancing over, distracted by what was happening. By her 10th shot, the range had gone completely silent except for the crack of rifle fire. When the ceasefire was called and targets were scored, the results were displayed on the large electronic board. Kai Yazi, 100 points, 10 X-ring hits. Perfect score. She was one of only 4 shooters out of 200 to achieve it. Bull Hartwick lowered his binoculars slowly, his expression unreadable. Captain Moss had stopped typing, staring at the scoreboard as if it had personally offended him. "Beginner's luck," Moss finally said, but his voice carried no conviction. Bull didn't respond. He was watching Kai as she carefully cleaned her rifle, methodical and unhurried, showing the same respect to her weapon that a master craftsman shows their tools. "Maybe," Bull said quietly. "Or maybe we just stopped paying attention to what really matters." As Kai packed up her equipment, a shadow fell across her mat. She looked up to see a tall man in a British SAS uniform, his chest decorated with ribbons that spoke of deployments in some of the world's hardest places. His name tag read Holloway. "That was impressive shooting," he said with a crisp British accent. "I'm Captain James Holloway, SAS." "Thank you," Kai said, continuing her packing. "I noticed your rifle. That's not standard issue." "No, sir. It's personal. May I ask how you came to be such a proficient shot?" Kai paused, considering whether to engage. Finally, she said, "My grandfather taught me. He believed that shooting wasn't about dominating the target. It was about becoming part of everything around you, the wind, the earth, the space between you and where you're aiming. He said that's what the elders taught him, and that's what he taught me." Holloway nodded slowly, genuine respect in his eyes. "Your grandfather sounds like he was a wise man, and clearly an excellent teacher." He extended his hand. "I look forward to competing against you in the next rounds." Kai shook his hand, appreciating that he'd treated her as an equal competitor rather than a curiosity. "Thank you, Captain." As Holloway walked away, Kai felt a small shift in the atmosphere. One person had seen her as a shooter, not as an anomaly. It was a start, but the real challenges were still to come, and not all of them would come from the targets downrange. That evening, in the competitors' briefing room, the atmosphere was electric with speculation. The preliminary scores had been posted, and Kai's perfect score had placed her in 12th position overall, a shocking result that had upended everyone's assumptions. As Kai entered the room to sign in for the next day's competition, the conversations didn't stop. They transformed. What had been dismissive mockery now carried edges of resentment and suspicion. She found a seat in the back row, keeping to herself, reviewing the next day's course of fire in her mind. "Excuse me." She looked up to see a Russian shooter, his name tag identifying him as Volkov, standing over her with two colleagues flanking him. His face was hard, his eyes cold. "I have question," he said in heavily accented English. "How does someone with old rifle and no international experience achieve perfect score?" The room went quiet. Everyone was now watching. Kai kept her voice level. Practice, training, and respect for the fundamentals. Volkov smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Or perhaps, different kind of help. In my country, we have seen many times when competitions are, how do you say, adjusted for political purposes. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Kai stood slowly, maintaining eye contact. In my country, we value honesty and integrity. I earned my score the same way everyone else did, one shot at a time. If you have concerns about the competition's fairness, I suggest you speak with the officials rather than making accusations you can't support. "We will see tomorrow," Volkov said, his smile fading. "When the difficulty increases, when the pressure builds, we will see what kind of shooter you truly are." He walked away, his colleagues following, leaving Kai standing alone as the room's attention slowly returned to other conversations. But Kai noticed something else. Not everyone had looked away with judgment. Captain Holloway gave her a subtle nod of respect. A German shooter, a woman in her 30s, offered a small smile of solidarity. And in the back of the room, standing in the shadows, Sergeant Major Bull Hartwick watched with an expression that had shifted from skepticism to something else entirely. Curiosity, perhaps, or recognition. Kai returned to her seat, her heart beating steadily, her mind already focused on tomorrow. She knew what was coming. The targets would get harder, the distances would increase, the conditions would become more challenging, and the scrutiny on her would intensify with every successful shot. But she'd faced challenges before. She'd faced discrimination, doubt, and dismissal. She'd faced the pain of loss and the weight of carrying her grandfather's legacy. And she'd learned that the only way forward was through. One step at a time, one breath at a time, one shot at a time. As she left the briefing room and walked across the darkening base toward her barracks, she looked up at the emerging stars. Somewhere beyond them, in the place where ancestors watch, she felt her grandfather's pride. "Hozo Huji," she whispered to the night. "Walk in beauty. Tomorrow would bring new challenges." But tonight, in this moment, she was exactly where she needed to be. The championship had only just begun. The second day of competition dawned gray and heavy with approaching weather. Dark clouds rolled in from the south, bringing with them winds that would test every shooter's skill and nerve. The course of fire had been announced the night before, moving targets at variable distances from 400 to 1,000 meters, with shooters required to engage 8 targets in under 6 minutes, while adapting to constantly changing wind conditions. Kai woke before sunrise, as she always did. In the quiet darkness of her barracks room, she performed the morning ritual her grandfather had taught her, a prayer of gratitude in Navajo, acknowledging the 4 sacred directions and asking for strength, wisdom, and balance. She'd been mocked for this practice during basic training, called superstitious and primitive. But she'd learned that what others thought of her didn't matter. What mattered was staying centered, staying connected to who she was. She cleaned her rifle with the same meditative care she applied to everything. Each motion was deliberate, purposeful. The Winchester had been her constant companion through 3 years of reserve duty, countless hours of practice, and now, this championship. She knew every quirk of its action, every subtle characteristic that made it unique. Modern rifles might have computers and adjustment systems, but they lacked something fundamental, a relationship between shooter and weapon built on trust and understanding. By the time she arrived at the range, the wind had picked up significantly. Flags along the berms snapped and twisted, indicating gusts of 12 to 15 miles per hour with unpredictable shifts. The range officers were conferring, deciding whether conditions were safe for competition. Finally, they gave the green light. The championship would continue. The shooting order had been randomized again, and Kai found herself scheduled for the 3rd relay. That meant she'd have the opportunity to observe 2 other groups before her turn, watching how the wind affected bullet flight and how different shooters adapted. She found a position on the observation berm where she could see the full range. The first relay was called to the line, 20 shooters representing different nations and units. Among them was Volkov, the Russian who'd challenged her the night before. Kai watched with analytical attention as the relay began. The targets appeared at random intervals, steel silhouettes that popped up for only seconds before dropping. Shooters had to identify, range, adjust for wind, and fire before the target disappeared. Miss your window, and the opportunity was gone. Volkov was good, very good. His rifle was a modern SVD Dragunov variant, equipped with advanced optics and a sophisticated ballistic computer. He moved through the course with mechanical efficiency, engaging 7 of his 8 targets successfully. Only the 1,000-meter target, buffeted by a particularly strong gust, eluded him. When the relay ended, Volkov's score placed him in strong position. 7 hits, with excellent time. As he left the firing line, he glanced toward the observation area, his eyes finding Kai. The message was clear. Match that. The second relay included Captain Holloway from the British SAS and the German woman Kai had noticed the night before. Her name tag read Fisher. Both were exceptional shooters. Holloway, with his L115A3 rifle, demonstrated the kind of smooth, confident shooting that came from years of operational experience. Fisher, using a Blazer R93 Tactical, showed remarkable composure under pressure, her transitions between targets fluid and efficient. When their scores were posted, Holloway had 8 hits, a perfect run. Fisher had 7, losing 1 target when the wind shifted unexpectedly just as she fired. But both times were excellent, setting a high bar for the remaining competitors. Third relay, to the line. Kai gathered her equipment and moved to her assigned position. Lane 23, roughly in the middle of the firing line. On either side of her were shooters from South Korea and Israel, both carrying precision rifles that probably cost more than Kai made in a year. The range safety officer began his briefing. Shooters, you will engage 8 targets at distances ranging from 400 to 1,000 meters. Targets will appear in random sequence and remain exposed for a maximum of 8 seconds. You must identify, range, and engage while adapting to current wind conditions. Your time begins when the first target appears and ends when you've fired 8 shots or 6 minutes have elapsed, whichever comes first. Any questions? No one spoke. Load and make ready. Kai's hands moved through the familiar ritual. Magazine inserted. Bolt cycled smoothly, round chambered. She settled into her shooting position, prone, using a bipod she'd installed on the Winchester's forend. Her breathing slowed, deepened. Her heart rate dropped. Around her, the noise of the range, commands, mechanical sounds, other competitors, faded into background static. Stand by. She felt the wind on her left cheek, variable, gusting. Probably 12 miles per hour average, but with spikes to 18. Coming from 7 o'clock, maybe 8 o'clock, depending on exactly where downrange. Target's hot. The first target snapped up at 600 meters, slightly left of center. Kai's scope found it instantly. She made a quick wind call, hold left edge, and pressed the trigger. The Winchester barked, and 600 meters away, the steel target rang with impact before dropping. Target 2 appeared at 400 meters, close and right. Easy range, but the wind would have less effect. She adjusted, fired, hit. Target 3, 800 meters, dead center. This one required more calculation. She felt the wind strengthen slightly, pushing from 730 now. She held into it, squeezed. The half-second delay before impact felt eternal, then hit. She was flowing now, moving from target to target with the kind of instinctive response that came from thousands of repetitions. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind. Don't think, Shiaji. Feel, trust what you know. Target 4, 500 meters, left side, hit. Target 5, 900 meters, right side. The wind gusted just as the target appeared. Kai waited 1 heartbeat for the gust to pass, then fired. Hit. Target 6, 700 meters, center, hit. Target 7, 1,000 meters, far left. This was the longest shot, the one that had defeated many shooters in the previous relay. Kai took an extra moment, reading the wind flags at intervals downrange. The wind was layered, stronger at mid-range, lighter at distance. She held just inside the left edge and sent the round. The impact took longer, and for a moment she wondered if she'd missed, then hit. One target left. Target 8 appeared at 550 meters, slightly right. But as Kai's crosshairs found it, the wind shifted dramatically, a gust that made the flags suddenly snap in the opposite direction. She immediately corrected, holding to the right edge now instead of left. The shot broke clean. The bullet flew through turbulent air, its trajectory bent by forces invisible to the naked eye but felt in the bones of an experienced shooter. The steel rang. Hit. 8 for 8. Cease fire. Unload and show clear. Kai's hands moved through the safety procedures automatically while her mind was still processing what had just happened. She'd engaged all 8 targets successfully, adapting to conditions that had defeated some of the world's best shooters. As the relay scores were posted, a murmur rippled through the crowd of observers. Kai Yazzie, 8 hits, time 4 minutes 37 seconds. She'd not only matched Captain Holloway's perfect run, she'd done it faster. In the observation tower, Sergeant Major Bull Hartwick let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Captain Moss stood beside him, staring at the scoreboard in disbelief. "That's not possible," Moss said quietly. "The wind was worse for her relay. The targets were more random, and she's using a rifle that's older than I am." Bull lowered his binoculars, and for the first time in the competition, he allowed himself a small smile. Maybe that's exactly why it is possible. While everyone else is trusting their computers and compensators, she's trusting herself, reading the wind like a language, not just numbers on a screen. "You can't seriously believe there's some mystical Native American wind-reading ability," Moss scoffed. "That's absurd." "I don't believe in mysticism," Bull replied, his voice taking on an edge. "But I do believe in fundamentals. I believe in shooters who understand that marksmanship is 70% mental, 20% technical, and 10% equipment. And I'm watching someone who's mastered all 3 while everyone else has been focusing on that last 10%. He turned to Moss. "Maybe we've been so busy upgrading our rifles that we've forgotten to upgrade our shooters." On the range, Kai was packing her equipment when Captain Holloway approached, a genuine smile on his weathered face. "Outstanding shooting," he said, extending his hand. "That 1,000-meter target in those wind conditions. I thought I was the only one who'd managed it today." Kai shook his hand. "Thank you, Captain. Your run was excellent as well." "I had every advantage. Modern rifle, ballistic computer, custom ammunition. You had skill." He nodded toward her Winchester. "May I ask how old that rifle is?" 73 years, Kai replied. "It was made in 1952. Holloway whistled softly. "I've got boots younger than that rifle, and you're outperforming equipment that costs 20 times what that's worth. My grandfather used to say that an expensive rifle makes you feel like a better shooter, but practice makes you become one. Your grandfather sounds like he would have gotten along well with my father. He was a Royal Marine, old school. Believed the same things." Holloway paused. "There's going to be a lot of attention on you now, not all of it positive." "I know," Kai said simply. "Just watch your back. Some people don't handle being outperformed very well, especially when it challenges their assumptions about who belongs in certain spaces." He met her eyes. "You've earned your place here. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." "I won't," Kai assured him. As Holloway walked away, Kai noticed other competitors watching her, some with respect, some with resentment, some with calculation. She understood what was happening. She wasn't just competing anymore. She'd become a symbol, whether she wanted to be or not. Every shot she made would be scrutinized, every success questioned, every failure magnified. The afternoon brought more challenges. A speed shoot at 300 meters required shooters to engage 15 targets in under 2 minutes, testing not just accuracy but target acquisition speed and rifle manipulation under time pressure. Then came a stress shoot where competitors had to sprint 400 meters carrying full gear, then immediately engage 5 targets at varying distances while their heart rates were maximal and their breathing labored. Kai performed well in both, though not perfectly. On the speed shoot, she got 14 of 15 targets. One target at the edge of her peripheral vision snapped down just as she was transitioning to it. On the stress shoot, she got all 5 targets, but her time was slower than the leaders due to the physical demands of the sprint with gear. By the end of day 2, the leaderboard had taken shape. The top 32 competitors who would advance to the championship bracket were determined. Kai found herself in 9th position overall, a ranking that shocked observers and competitors alike. But it was the names surrounding her that told the real story. Captain James Holloway, SAS, 2nd place. Staff Sergeant Volkov, Russian Spetsnaz, 5th place. Master Sergeant Chen, Chinese Special Forces, 3rd place. Captain Fisher, German KSK, 7th place. She was competing at the highest level against the most elite military shooters in the world. That evening, the championship organizers hosted a mandatory competitors' reception, a chance for international military relations, networking, and the requisite speeches from officials. Kai would have preferred to skip it, to return to her quiet barracks room and mentally prepare for the elimination rounds beginning tomorrow. But attendance was required. She dressed in her Army service uniform, the formal green jacket and skirt that she wore maybe twice a year. Her ribbons were modest: Army Reserve Components Achievement Medal, National Defense Service Medal, Army Service Ribbon. Nothing compared to the chests of career combat veterans surrounding her. The reception was held in the Officers Club, a grand building with dark wood paneling and photographs of military history covering the walls. Kai entered quietly, planning to fulfill her obligation with minimal interaction. "Sergeant Yazzie." She turned to see a lieutenant colonel approaching, his uniform identifying him as belonging to the Army marksmanship unit. His name tag read, Warren. "Sir," she acknowledged with a respectful nod. "I've been following your performance," Warren said, his tone friendly. "Remarkable shooting. Your 900-meter engagement this morning, the way you waited for that wind gust to pass, that showed real environmental awareness." "Thank you, sir." "I wanted to introduce myself. I'm the executive officer for the AMU. Have you ever considered trying out for the marksmanship unit? Shooters with your level of skill could benefit from our training programs, equipment, and competitive opportunities." Kai blinked, surprised. The Army Marksmanship Unit was the military's premier competitive shooting organization, home to Olympic medalists and world champions. I'm honored, sir. But I'm Army Reserve, not active duty, and I have commitments back home in Alaska. "We've worked with reservists before," Warren said, "and we're always looking for talent. Just think about it. Here's my card. After the championship, if you're interested, reach out." He handed her a business card and moved on to network with other officers, leaving Kai holding a piece of paper that represented possibilities she'd never even considered. "Quite the Cinderella story you're writing." Kai turned to find Captain Moss standing behind her, a drink in his hand and skepticism in his eyes. "Sir?" she replied neutrally. Unheralded shooter from nowhere, using Grandpa's hunting rifle, suddenly competing with the best special operations shooters in the world. Makes for great optics. His tone made it clear he didn't mean that as a compliment. "I'm just here to compete, sir." "Are you? Or are you here because someone in the Pentagon decided the Army needed better diversity metrics and pressured the selection committee?" Moss took a sip of his drink. "Don't get me wrong, you can shoot. But there are 100 shooters with your skill level who didn't get invitations to this championship. Makes one wonder why you did." Kai felt heat rising in her chest, but she kept her voice level. "With respect, sir, I qualified for this championship the same way everyone else did, through competitive scores and sanctioned events. My invitation was based on performance, not politics." "So you say." Moss smiled without warmth. "We'll see how you handle things when the real pressure starts. When you're shooting against operators who've taken shots under enemy fire, when lives were actually on the line, not just targets on a range. We'll see if that mystical Native American intuition holds up." He walked away before Kai could respond, leaving her standing alone with hands clenched and jaw tight. "Don't let him get to you." Kai looked up to see Sergeant Major Bull Hartwick standing nearby, his expression sympathetic but firm. "Sir, He's an ass," Bull said bluntly. "Smart officer, good at logistics, but he sees the world through spreadsheets and statistics. Doesn't understand that some things can't be quantified." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I've been doing this for 3 decades, Sergeant. I've trained thousands of soldiers, and I've learned that real talent shows itself in unexpected places. Gender doesn't matter. Race doesn't matter. Background doesn't matter. What matters is heart, discipline, and skill. You've shown all three. Thank you, sir, Kai said quietly, feeling the tightness in her chest ease slightly. That said, Bull continued, he's right about one thing. The pressure is about to intensify. Tomorrow starts the elimination brackets. Single elimination. One bad performance, one mental error, and you're done. The scrutiny on you will be intense. Can you handle that? Kai met his eyes, and in that moment, Bull saw something that made him understand why this young woman had made it this far. Her eyes held the calm of deep water, the steadiness of ancient stone. My grandfather taught me that pressure is just another wind to read, she said. You don't fight it, you understand it, adjust for it, and make your shot anyway. Bull nodded slowly, a genuine smile crossing his face. Your grandfather was a wise man. I wish I could have met him. He would have liked you, sir, Kai said. He respected people who judged others by their actions, not their assumptions. Then I'll do my best to honor that, Bull replied. Now go get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. As Kai left the reception and walked across the darkened base, she felt the weight of the coming challenges, but she also felt something else. Validation. Not from the scores on the board, but from the respect of someone like Bull Hartwick. Someone who understood what really mattered. In her barracks room, she sat on her bunk and carefully removed her grandfather's dog tags from her pocket. Tags she carried everywhere but never wore publicly. They were worn smooth by decades of time, the stamped letters barely visible, but she could read them by touch. Yazi, Thomas, USMC, Code Talker. I'm walking in beauty, Shimasani, she whispered, using the Navajo word for grandfather. Just like you taught me. Thunder rumbled as the storm moved closer. Tomorrow would bring elimination rounds, increased pressure, and heightened scrutiny. But tonight Kai Yazi slept the peaceful sleep of someone who knows exactly who they are and why they're here. The championship was entering its decisive phase, and the underdog from the reservation wasn't done surprising people yet. The elimination rounds began under a sky that couldn't decide between rain and sun, creating dramatic shafts of light that broke through storm clouds like heaven's spotlights. It felt appropriate, divine attention on what was about to unfold. The championship bracket had been drawn the night before, pitting 32 shooters in head-to-head matches. The format was brutal in its simplicity. 2 competitors, 5 targets each, best performance advances. 1 mistake, 1 mental lapse, 1 gust of wind read incorrectly, and your championship was over. Kai's first-round opponent was a Finnish sniper named Korhonen, a stoic man in his late 30s with a reputation for ice-cold composure and deadly precision. His rifle was a Sako TRG M10, one of the finest precision weapons in the world, chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum, a cartridge designed to kill at distances that made most shooters uncomfortable. They met at the prep area before their scheduled time. Korhonen extended his hand with Nordic efficiency. I have heard much about you, he said in lightly accented English. The shooter with the old rifle and the new reputation. And I've heard about you, Kai replied, shaking his hand. They say you once made a shot at 1,400 meters in a blizzard. 1,500, Korhonen corrected with the hint of a smile. But who counts? He glanced at her Winchester. That is American history you carry. My grandfather fought against the Soviets with a Mosin Nagant older than your rifle. He always said old rifles have memory. They remember every shot, every success, every failure. They teach patience. Your grandfather sounds like he and mine would have understood each other. Perhaps all grandfathers understand what modern soldiers forget, Korhonen said philosophically. That the weapon is only extension of will. The will must be strong, or the weapon is just metal and wood. Competitors to the line. The course of fire was announced, 5 targets ranging from 600 to 1,100 meters, engaged in sequence. Fastest accurate completion wins. In case of a tie, judges would evaluate shot placement quality. They drew for shooting order. Korhonen would shoot first. Kai watched from the observation area as the Finnish sniper settled into position. His movements were economic, precise, mechanical in their efficiency. When the command came to engage, he moved through the targets with metronome consistency. 600 meters, hit. 700 meters, hit. 850 meters, hit. 950 meters, hit. 1100 meters. He took an extra moment, reading the wind that had picked up again, then fired, hit. 5 for 5. Time, 3 minutes, 42 seconds. Solid, professional, exactly what you'd expect from someone with his reputation. Now it was Kai's turn. She moved to the firing line, her grandfather's rifle feeling familiar and right in her hands. She settled into position, finding that perfect place where body, earth, and weapon became one system. Shooter ready? Ready, Kai confirmed. You may engage when prepared. She took a breath. Then another, slowing her heart rate, clearing her mind. The world contracted to the scope picture, the target, the wind, the bullet's flight. First target, 600 meters. She fired, hit. Second target, 700 meters. Fire, hit. Third target, 850 meters. The wind shifted slightly, pushing from 8 o'clock now instead of 9. She adjusted her hold. Fire, hit. Fourth target, 950 meters. This one required more calculation. The light was strange, angled through breaking clouds, creating optical illusions about distance. She trusted her rangefinder, her experience, her intuition. Fire, hit. Fifth target, 1100 meters. The longest shot, and the wind was dancing, gusting, dropping, swirling. Kai waited, feeling the pattern, understanding that wind, like water, has rhythms. There, a momentary lull between gusts. She fired into that brief window. The bullet flew through 1100 meters of turbulent air, dropping, drifting, seeking its target. Impact. Hit, 5 for 5. Time, 3 minutes, 38 seconds. She'd beaten Koronen by 4 seconds. As the results were posted, Koronen approached her, his expression respectful. You read the wind on that last shot like you could see it. That was... I have no words in English. Beautiful is not enough. You shot well, Kai replied. In another bracket, your time would have won, but not in this one. He smiled without bitterness. This is how competition works. May you continue to shoot as well as your grandfather taught you. They shook hands, and Korhonen walked off the range with his head high, defeated but not diminished. Kai's victory created ripples. Social media, which had been following the championship with moderate interest, suddenly exploded with commentary. Videos of her shooting went viral. Headlines appeared. Underdog shooter stuns military championship. Native American soldier defeats elite international competition. Ancient rifle outperforms modern technology, but with attention came scrutiny. By midday, online forums were dissecting every aspect of her background, her scores, her equipment. Conspiracy theories emerged. She must be using illegal ammunition. Her rifle must have hidden modifications. The targets must have been adjusted in her favor. The whole thing was a military propaganda operation designed to promote diversity. Kai tried to ignore it, focusing instead on her next match scheduled for later that afternoon. But the noise was becoming difficult to shut out. Her second-round opponent was Captain Melissa Grant from the U.S. Air Force Pararescue. Grant was a respected combat veteran with 3 deployments to Afghanistan and a reputation for performing under impossible pressure. Unlike some competitors who'd shown resentment toward Kai's success, Grant approached her with genuine camaraderie. Been watching your shooting, Grant said as they prepared. You've got something special. That wind read on the last target against Korhonen. That was next level. Thank you, Kai said. Your resume is impressive. Pararescue is no joke. Different kind of pressure, Grant acknowledged. In my world, if I miss a shot, someone might die. In competition, if you miss, you just lose. But the fundamentals are the same. Breathing, trigger control, reading conditions, managing stress. She smiled. May the best shooter win. The match was close. Both women shot flawlessly under challenging conditions. A light rain had begun, adding another variable to range calculations. Grant's experience showed. Her shots were confident, decisive, fast. But Kai's time was slightly better, and her shot placement was marginally tighter. Kai advanced, 5-5, winning on aggregate score. As they shook hands afterward, Grant said something that stuck with Kai. You know what impressed me most? Not your accuracy, your breathing. You breathe like someone who's meditated for years. That's your secret weapon, mental discipline. Keep that, and you'll go far. The words resonated because they touched on something Kai had never articulated but always felt. Her grandfather's teachings weren't just about shooting. They were about presence, about being fully in each moment, about finding stillness in chaos. That was the real inheritance, more valuable than any rifle. By evening, Kai had advanced to the quarterfinals, scheduled for the following day. She was one of 8 remaining shooters. The others were a roster of military shooting elite. Captain Holloway, British SAS, Sergeant Volkov, Russian Spetsnaz, Master Sergeant Chen, Chinese Special Forces, Staff Sergeant Williams, U.S. Army Rangers, Captain Fisher, German KSK, Lieutenant Commander Nakamura, Japanese Special Forces, and Sergeant First Class Morrison, U.S. Navy SEALs. 8 shooters, 4 matches. 4 would continue. 4 would be eliminated. That night, unable to sleep, Kai walked to the range. Security waved her through. Competitors had access for mental preparation. She found herself drawn to the 1,100-meter line, where the championship's longest shots were taken. She didn't bring her rifle, just stood there in the darkness, feeling the wind, listening to its voice. The storm had passed, leaving behind crisp, cold air that carried sounds from miles away. She could hear the distant rumble of a train, the rustle of trees beyond the berm, the settling of earth beneath her feet. Couldn't sleep either? She turned to find Sergeant Major Bull Hartwick approaching from the tower area, carrying a thermos of what smelled like coffee. "Just thinking, sir," Kai replied. "Mind if I join you? Or do you prefer solitude?" "Company is welcome." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both looking downrange at targets invisible in the darkness. "You know," Bull finally said, "I've been running this championship for 8 years, seen hundreds of shooters, dozens of countries, every kind of equipment and technique imaginable. And I've learned something. The shooters who win aren't always the ones with the best gear or even the most experience. They're the ones who understand themselves, their strengths, their limitations, their purpose." "What makes you think I understand those things?" Kai asked. "Because I've watched you. Not just your shooting, though that's been exceptional. I've watched how you carry yourself, how you respond to pressure, to criticism, to attention. You don't get rattled. You don't get arrogant. You stay centered." He took a sip from his thermos. "That's not something that can be taught in basic training. That comes from somewhere deeper." Kai was quiet for a moment, then said, "My grandfather used to take me into the desert before sunrise. We'd sit on a rock and watch the day begin, the way light changes, the way shadows move, the way the world wakes up. He'd say, 'Shiaji, most people watch the sunrise. We're going to be part of it.' I didn't understand what he meant then. I think I do now." "What did he mean?" "That observation and participation are different things. You can watch the world, or you can be in conversation with it. Shooting isn't about imposing your will on a target. It's about understanding wind, distance, light, your own body, your equipment, all of it, and finding where you fit into that system. Then the shot isn't you against the target. It's you as part of everything, and the bullet just goes where it was always going to go." Bull nodded slowly. "That's the most profound thing I've heard about marksmanship in my entire career. And I've heard a lot of theories, a lot of technical explanations, a lot of mechanical breakdowns. But what you just described, that's mastery. That's what separates good shooters from great ones." "I don't know about mastery," Kai said. "I just know what my grandfather taught me." "Your grandfather," Bull said, "must have been an extraordinary man. He was a code talker in World War II, fought in the Pacific, saw things he never talked about, carried memories that haunted him. When he came home, people treated him like he was less than human because he was Native American. He couldn't vote in some states, couldn't get service in some restaurants, but he never became bitter. He just lived his life with dignity, taught his family our language, our traditions, our way of seeing the world. And when I was old enough, he taught me to shoot, not as violence, but as meditation, as connection. Did he know you were competing here? He died 3 years ago, but..." Kai smiled slightly. "I think he knows. I feel him sometimes, especially when I'm shooting. Like he's standing behind me, his hand on my shoulder, reminding me to breathe, to be present, to trust myself." "I think," Bull said gently, "he'd be very proud of what you're doing here. Not just the scores, though those are impressive, but how you're representing him, your heritage, yourself, with dignity, with grace. That matters more than any target you hit. They stood in silence for a while longer, two soldiers from different backgrounds finding common ground in the darkness of a rifle range. Finally, Bull said, "You should get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be intense. Quarterfinals draw media attention, political attention. The pressure goes up exponentially." "I know," Kai said, "but I'm ready." "I believe you are," Bull replied. "Just remember, you've already proven everything you need to prove. Win or lose tomorrow, you've earned your place here. Don't let anyone take that from you." As Kai walked back to her barracks, she felt fortified by the conversation. Bull Hartwick's respect meant something because it was earned, not given. He'd watched her perform, assessed her honestly, and validated her presence not as a diversity statistic, but as a legitimate competitor. But she also knew what tomorrow would bring. The quarterfinals would be broadcast internationally. Officials from the Pentagon would be present. Media would be everywhere. And somewhere in that audience would be people hoping she'd fail, needing her to fail, because her success challenged their comfortable assumptions about who belonged in elite military spaces. In her room, she laid out her uniform for tomorrow, checked her equipment one final time, and set her alarm. Then she sat on her bunk holding her grandfather's dog tags, feeling their weight, their history, their meaning. "Grandfather," she whispered in Navajo, "tomorrow I shoot for both of us, for every code talker who was never honored, for every Native person who was told they weren't good enough, for every soldier who was dismissed because of who they were instead of what they could do. Help me walk in beauty. Help me shoot with purpose. Help me honor your memory." She slept that night with the tags in her hand, dreaming of desert sunrises and an old man's patient voice teaching her to read the wind. Tomorrow would bring the quarterfinals. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opponents, new pressure. But tonight, Kai Yazzie was at peace. The morning of the quarterfinals arrived with the kind of perfect clarity that shooters pray for. Cool temperature, light winds, high visibility. But Kai knew that perfect conditions brought their own challenges. When nothing external could be blamed, every error became purely the shooter's responsibility. The range had been transformed overnight. Bleachers had been erected for spectators. Media platforms held cameras from military networks, sports channels, and news organizations. Flags from all competing nations snapped in the gentle breeze. Pentagon officials sat in a reserved section, including a two-star general whose presence signaled the championship's importance to military leadership. Kai's quarterfinal opponent was Staff Sergeant Travis Williams from the U.S. Army Rangers, a decorated combat veteran with 2 Bronze Stars and a reputation as one of the Army's most talented long-range shooters. Unlike some competitors who'd shown resentment toward Kai, Williams approached the match with professional respect. "Heard a lot about you, Sergeant," he said as they prepared. "Looking forward to a good match." "Same here, Sergeant," Kai replied. The course was brutal. 7 targets ranging from 500 to 1,300 meters, including 2 movers that would cross at random intervals. Both shooters would engage simultaneously from adjacent positions, eliminating the advantage of watching your opponent shoot first. They settled into position. The range officer gave his commands. At engage, both rifles barked almost simultaneously. The match was extraordinary. Both shooters were flawless through the first 5 targets. Static shots at 500, 700, 900, 1100, and 1200 meters. Every shot center mass. The competition came down to the 2 moving targets at 1,300 meters. Williams engaged first. His bullet caught the leading edge of the target. A hit, but not centered. Still, a hit at 1,300 meters on a moving target was exceptional shooting. Kai's turn. The target appeared, moving left to right at what looked like walking speed, roughly 3 miles per hour. At 1,300 meters, that meant she needed to lead the target by approximately 12 feet. But wind would affect the bullet's lateral drift, and the target's angular velocity would be different from her perspective than from straight down range. Her grandfather's voice. "Don't calculate, Shiaji. Feel." She let intuition merge with experience, held the crosshairs where they needed to be, and pressed the trigger with the same gentle surprise she always sought. The target was 1,300 meters away. The bullet took almost 2 seconds to arrive, an eternity in shooting. Kai watched through her scope as the 168-grain projectile arced through the air, dropped by gravity, pushed by wind, seeking its destiny. Impact. Dead center. The crowd erupted. Williams looked over, saw the shot placement through his spotting scope, and actually laughed. Not bitterly, but with genuine admiration. That, he said, was one of the finest shots I've ever witnessed. Fair and square. Well done, Sergeant. They shook hands, and as Williams gathered his equipment, he said something that Kai would remember. I came here to win, but I'm not disappointed to lose to someone who shoots like that. You're representing the Army well. Keep it up. Kai had advanced to the semifinals. The other quarterfinal results came in. Captain Holloway defeated Lieutenant Commander Nakamura, Sergeant Volkov defeated Captain Fisher, and Master Sergeant Chen defeated Sergeant First Class Morrison. The semifinals would be Kai versus Volkov and Holloway versus Chen. There was a 2-hour break before the semifinals. Kai used the time to find a quiet spot away from the crowds, away from the media, away from the noise. She needed to center herself, to reconnect with the purpose that had brought her here. She found a spot behind the armory building, a patch of grass with a view of distant tree-covered hills. She sat cross-legged, closed her eyes, and performed a breathing exercise her grandfather had taught her. 4 counts in, hold for 4. 4 counts out, hold for 4. The pattern that returned the nervous system to balance. Impressive shooting today. Kai opened her eyes to find Captain James Holloway standing a respectful distance away. Thank you, Captain. Your match was excellent as well. May I join you? At her nod, he sat on the grass nearby, his British formality softening in the private moment. I wanted to say something before the semifinals begin. Something I think you need to hear. I'm listening. In 22 years of military service, I've operated on 5 continents, worked with dozens of allied forces, and trained hundreds of soldiers. And in all that time, I've learned that the best operators aren't the ones with the most experience or the best equipment. They're the ones who understand why they're there, who have a purpose beyond ego or ambition. He met her eyes. You have that. I can see it in how you shoot, how you carry yourself, how you respond to pressure. You're not here to prove you're better than everyone else. You're here to honor something. Someone. Kai felt her throat tighten. My grandfather. I thought so. The way you handle that rifle. It's not just a tool to you. It's a connection. Holloway smiled gently. My father gave me his compass before he died. World War II vintage used in the North Africa campaign. I carry it on every operation. It doesn't work anymore. Hasn't for decades. But I carry it because it connects me to him, to his courage, to the values he represented. I understand what you're doing here. It's not about the championship. It's about honoring memory, honoring legacy. Yes, Kai said softly. Exactly that. Then know this. You've already succeeded. Win or lose the next match, you've honored him. You've shown that his teachings, his values, his way of seeing the world, they matter, they work, they produce excellence. Holloway stood, preparing to return to the competition area. But between you and me, I think you're going to win. Not because of luck or circumstance, because you understand something most shooters never learn, that the real battle isn't with the target or the opponent. It's with yourself. Master that, and everything else becomes possible. He walked away, leaving Kai sitting with his words, feeling their truth resonate in her chest. The semi-finals began 90 minutes later. The crowd had grown. Word had spread about the underdog shooter with the old rifle, and people wanted to witness history being made or prevented. Kai's match against Volkov drew particular interest. The Russian had been vocal about his skepticism regarding her success, suggesting in interviews that environmental luck and political favoritism explained her performance. Now they would meet head-to-head, and only one would advance to the final. The format was different for semifinals. 10 targets at extreme distances, 1,000 to 1,500 meters, with increasing difficulty. Engage all 10 as quickly as possible while maintaining accuracy. The pressure was maximum. The margin for error was 0. They drew for position. Volkov would shoot from lane 1, Kai from lane 2. Close enough to be aware of each other, far enough to avoid direct distraction. The range officer gave his commands. At engage, the competition began. Volkov shot with mechanical precision, his modern rifle and ballistic computer providing exact solutions for each engagement. His shots were fast, confident, professional. He moved through the first 5 targets in under 4 minutes. Impressive by any standard. Kai shot differently. Each engagement was a ritual. Observe, breathe, feel, commit. Her rhythm was slower but deeply controlled. Where Volkov's shooting was calculation, Kai's was conversation, with the wind, with the rifle, with the space between her and the target. Through the first 8 targets, both shooters were perfect. 8 hits each, no misses. The match would be decided on the final 2 targets, both at 1,500 meters, both small, 18-inch diameter, both challenging even for world-class shooters. Volkov engaged target 9. His shot impacted high and right, still within the target zone but not centered. A hit but not perfect. Kai breathed, read the wind. Complex currents at 1,500 meters, layered and shifting. She waited for a moment of relative stability, then pressed the trigger. Her shot impacted near center. Better than Volkov's placement, but the match wasn't over yet. Target 10, the final shot. 1,500 meters, small target. Wind still dancing. Volkov took his time, making calculations on his rifle's computer system, adjusting for temperature, humidity, barometric pressure. He fired. The shot impacted left of center. A hit, but again, not perfectly centered. Kai's turn. The championship final was 1 shot away, but more than that, vindication was 1 shot away. Proof that her grandfather's teachings, her traditions, her way of seeing the world could compete with any technology, any system, any methodology. She settled behind her rifle, feeling the Winchester's familiar weight, its familiar balance. She thought of her grandfather sitting beside her on that desert rock, watching sunrise, teaching patience. The wind is alive, Shiaji. Listen to what it tells you. She listened. She felt. She understood. The wind was gusting from 9 o'clock, approximately 8 miles per hour, but with a subtle downdraft component that would push the bullet lower as it traveled. Most shooters would miss that nuance, but Kai felt it in her bones. She adjusted her hold, slightly into the wind, slightly high, to compensate for the drop. She took a breath, released half, found that perfect moment between heartbeats where the body is completely still. She pressed the trigger. The bullet flew through 1,500 meters of complex air, dropping, drifting, adjusting to forces invisible to cameras but felt by an experienced shooter. Time stretched. The world held its breath. Impact. Dead center. Perfect shot. The crowd erupted in applause. Judges conferred, reviewing shot placement through spotting scopes and electronic scoring. The results were posted. Kai Yazi, 10-10 hits, superior placement quality. Sergeant Volkov, 10-10 hits, standard placement quality. Winner, Kai Yazi. She had advanced to the championship final. As Kai stood and began packing her equipment, Volkov approached. His face was hard to read, professional mask firmly in place. For a moment she wondered if he would make another accusation, another dismissive comment. Instead, he extended his hand. "You are exceptional shooter," he said simply. "I was wrong to suggest otherwise. You have earned place here. You have earned respect." He paused, something almost like a smile crossing his face. "Your rifle is old, but your skill is timeless. This is rare combination." Kai shook his hand, feeling the firmness of genuine respect. "Thank you, Sergeant. You shot well. In another bracket, you would be in the final. But not in this bracket," Volkov acknowledged. "This is how competition works. May you shoot as well in final as you shot today." He walked away with dignity, and Kai felt a shift. Volkov's acknowledgement mattered because it had been earned through performance, not given as consolation or political correctness. He'd been her harshest critic, and now he'd become one of her validators. The other semi-final had concluded. Captain Holloway had defeated Master Sergeant Chen in a close match that came down to wind reading at extreme distance. Holloway's experience in mountain operations, where wind is complex and unpredictable, had given him the edge. The final was set. Kai Yazzie versus Captain James Holloway. United States versus United Kingdom. Reserve soldier versus career special operations officer. Old rifle versus new. Traditional wisdom versus modern training. The media narrative practically wrote itself. That evening, there was no reception, no formal dinner. Finalists were given time to prepare, to rest, to focus. The final would take place the next day at noon, with maximum ceremony and attention. Kai spent the evening alone, walking the range one final time, feeling its contours, its personality. Tomorrow this place would test her one final time. And regardless of outcome, she wanted to remember it. Not as an adversary, but as a teacher. She found herself at the 1,500-meter line, looking downrange at targets barely visible in the fading light. Somewhere out there was the target she'd hit perfectly today. That shot had been one of the best of her life, not because of the distance or difficulty, but because in that moment, she'd been completely present, completely connected to everything her grandfather had taught her. Beautiful evening. She turned to find Sergeant Major Bull Hartwick approaching, his ever-present thermos in hand. "Sir," she acknowledged, "saw your semi-final match. That last shot." He shook his head admiringly. "I've been around shooting my entire adult life, and I've never seen wind reading that sophisticated without computer assistance. That was pure skill." "Thank you, sir. Tomorrow's going to be intense. The final always is. But it's going to be especially intense for you." The media has built this into a story. Underdog Native American shooter with grandfather's rifle versus decorated British Special Forces captain. They're going to make it about more than just shooting. "I know," Kai said quietly. "How are you handling that?" "By remembering why I'm here. Not for the media. Not for the story. For my grandfather. For my ancestors who weren't allowed to speak their own language, weren't allowed to practice their own traditions, weren't valued or respected. I'm here to honor them by showing that our ways, our teachings, our knowledge, they have value. They produce excellence." Bull was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "In 32 years of military service, I've heard a lot of motivations for why people compete, why they serve, why they push themselves. Most of it is ego, ambition, proving something to others. But what you just said, that's the purest motivation I've ever heard. That's why, regardless of what happens tomorrow, you've already won something more important than any championship." "What's that, sir?" "You've reminded all of us, everyone watching, everyone competing, everyone who's been dismissive or skeptical, that excellence comes from unexpected places. That tradition and innovation aren't opposites. That the old ways and the new ways can coexist, can even complement each other." He turned to face her directly. "You've also reminded us that shooters come in all colors, all backgrounds, all genders. That talent doesn't check boxes or follow demographic patterns. It just is. And the military, hell, the world, needed that reminder." Kai felt tears threatening, but held them back. "Thank you, sir. That means more than you know. Win or lose tomorrow, hold your head high. You've represented yourself, your heritage, your family with honor and dignity. Your grandfather would be proud." After Bull left, Kai stood alone in the gathering darkness, looking up at stars beginning to emerge. She found the North Star, Nahukos Biko, the star that never moves, the constant guide for travelers lost in darkness. "Grandfather," she whispered in Navajo, "tomorrow is the last test. Tomorrow I'll shoot for all of us. Whatever happens, know that I've walked in beauty. I've carried your teachings with honor. I've shown them that we belong." She returned to her barracks and slept deeply, dreamlessly, the sleep of someone who has made peace with whatever comes next. The next morning dawned clear and bright. The final was scheduled for noon, giving the sun time to burn off any morning moisture and stabilize temperature and wind conditions. Kai performed her morning ritual, prayers in Navajo, thanking the 4 sacred directions, asking for strength and wisdom. She cleaned her rifle with meditative care, each motion a prayer in itself. She dressed in her uniform, pinned on her modest ribbons, and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back was someone she barely recognized from 3 years ago, stronger, more confident, more certain of her place in the world, but also unchanged in the ways that mattered. Still centered, still grounded in her grandfather's teachings, still walking in beauty. At 11 o'clock she made her way to the range. The transformation was complete. What had been a training facility now looked like a major sporting event. Bleachers were packed with spectators, military personnel, family members, media representatives, local civilians invited to witness history. The Pentagon officials section had expanded to include a 3-star general and several colonels. Cameras on elevated platforms covered every angle. Kai found Captain Holloway at the equipment check area. He smiled when he saw her. "Ready for this?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," Kai replied. "I meant what I said yesterday. You've already proven everything that matters. Today is just the final demonstration." He paused. "Though I should warn you, I'm going to shoot my absolute best. I may respect you, but I also really want to win." Kai smiled. "I wouldn't want it any other way, Captain." The format for the final was announced. 15 targets, ranging from 500 to 1,700 meters, including 3 movers and 2 targets that would appear for only 5 seconds each. Most challenging course of fire in the championship's history. Both finalists would shoot simultaneously, eliminating any advantage from observation. They took their positions, lanes 1 and 2, rifles pointed downrange, flags snapping in the moderate wind. The range safety officer gave his commands. "Shooters, your course consists of 15 targets at distances marked in your briefing packet. Engage targets as they appear. Time starts when the first target is activated. Any questions?" "None." "Load and make ready." Kai's hands moved through the ritual they'd performed thousands of times. Magazine seated, bolt cycled, round chambered, safety on until ready to fire. Her breathing slowed, her heart rate dropped. The noise of the crowd, the cameras, the pressure, all of it faded into background static. She was here, now. Present. Connected to her rifle, to the earth beneath her, to the wind moving across the range, to her grandfather's memory. "Stand by." The world contracted to the scope picture. Targets hot. The final had begun. Both shooters moved through the course with extraordinary skill. Kai and Holloway were evenly matched through the first 10 targets. Both perfect, both fast, both adapting to conditions with the fluidity that comes from mastery. Target 11 appeared, a mover at 1,400 meters, crossing left to right. Holloway engaged first, his shot catching the trailing edge. Hit, but not centered. Kai waited an extra half second, reading how the target moved, understanding its rhythm. She fired. Center mass hit. Target 12. Static, 1,500 meters. Both shooters fired within seconds of each other. Both hit center mass. Target 13. Brief exposure, 700 meters, appearing for only 5 seconds. This tested reaction time and rapid target acquisition. Holloway got his shot off with 2 seconds remaining. Center mass. Kai fired with 1 second left. Also center mass. 2 targets remaining. Both at 1,700 meters. The longest shots in championship history. At this distance, bullets would be in flight for over 3 seconds, dropping more than 20 feet, affected by multiple wind layers, temperature gradients, and even the Coriolis effect from Earth's rotation. Target 14 appeared. Holloway took his time, making calculations, reading wind flags at multiple points downrange. He fired. The impact came after an agonizing wait. Hit, but high and right. Still within the target zone, but not centered. Kai's turn. She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the wind, sensing the space between her and the target. Her grandfather's voice. "At the longest distances, you cannot calculate everything. You must trust. You must know." She knew. She opened her eyes, found her sight picture, made minute adjustments for the complex wind, gusting from 8 o'clock at mid-range, but with a slight tailwind component at the target line. She held higher than seemed logical, compensating for the massive drop at 1,700 meters. She fired. 3 seconds of flight time, 3 seconds where breath held, hearts paused, the world waited. The target rang with impact. Center mass, 1 target remaining, 1 shot to decide the championship. Target 15, also 1,700 meters, but positioned at a slight angle, adding another layer of complexity to wind calculation. Both shooters were aware that this shot would determine everything. Holloway fired first. He'd made his calculations, committed to his solution. The bullet flew, time stretched, and impact came. A hit, right side of target, within the scoring zone, but not centered. Kai was last. The entire championship came down to this single shot. She thought of her grandfather, sitting beside her on that desert rock, teaching patience, teaching presence, teaching that the journey mattered more than the destination. She thought of every code talker who'd served their nation while being denied citizenship rights. She thought of every native person told they weren't good enough, smart enough, capable enough. She thought of every woman told she didn't belong in military combat arms. She thought of every person dismissed because of who they were rather than what they could do. And then she stopped thinking. She simply was. Her body knew what to do. Her rifle knew where to aim. The bullet knew where to go. She pressed the trigger, and the shot broke with perfect surprise, perfect timing, perfect execution. 1,700 meters away, over a mile, a small steel target waited for a 168-grain bullet traveling at 2,800 feet per second, dropping through layers of complex air, fighting gravity and wind and distance. 3 seconds of flight, 3 seconds of held breath, 3 seconds that felt like eternity. Impact, dead center. The crowd erupted in applause that rolled across the range like thunder. Judges conferred, reviewing electronic scoring and spotting scope verification. The results were processed, confirmed, double-checked. Finally, they were posted on the main scoreboard. International Military Marksmanship Championship. Final results. First place, Sergeant Kai Yazzie, United States Army Reserve, 1515 hits. Superior placement quality, second place. Captain James Holloway, British SAS, 1515 hits. Standard placement quality, Kai had won. She'd won the International Military Marksmanship Championship. She stood slowly, her legs shaking slightly from adrenaline, her hands trembling with emotion she'd kept contained throughout the entire competition. Captain Holloway was there immediately, pulling her into a respectful embrace. "Bloody brilliant shooting! Absolute brilliance! That last shot! That will be talked about for years!" "You shot amazingly," Kai managed to say. "Thank you for pushing me to be my best." "That's what competition is for," Holloway replied, genuine joy in his eyes despite his loss. "To bring out the excellence in each other. You did that for me today." Then came Sergeant Major Bull Hartwick, his weathered face split by a massive grin, tears unashamedly running down his cheeks. He pulled Kai into a bear hug that lifted her off the ground. "Your grandfather is looking down right now, smiling ear to ear," Bull said, his voice breaking. "You honored him. You honored your family. You honored every person who's ever been told they don't belong. You showed them what matters: skill, heart, discipline, and purpose." The award ceremony was elaborate. Flags, anthems, dignitaries presenting medals. Kai stood on the highest platform, the gold medal heavy around her neck, the American flag being raised as the national anthem played. She'd never been particularly patriotic. Her relationship with the United States was complicated by history, by her ancestors' experiences. But in that moment, standing on that platform, she felt something shift. She was claiming her place, not just as a Native American, but as an American. Both identities could coexist. Both deserved respect. The 3-star general approached after the ceremony. "Sergeant Yazzie, I'm General Marcus Bradley, Commanding General of U.S. Army Training and Doctrine Command. That was the finest display of marksmanship I've witnessed in 40 years of service." "Thank you, sir," Kai replied. "I want you to know that doors are opening for you. The Army Marksmanship Unit wants you. Special Operations Units are interested in your capabilities. You have opportunities most soldiers never receive." He paused. "But I also want you to know, you don't have to take them. You've proven everything you need to prove. Whatever you choose to do from here, you'll do it with the respect and support of this entire command." I appreciate that, sir. I'll need time to think about what's next. Take all the time you need, Sergeant. Just know, you've made history today. Changed perceptions, opened minds. That matters more than any medal. As the formal events concluded and crowds began to disperse, Kai found herself alone for a moment at the 1,700-meter line. She stood where she'd taken that final shot, looking downrange at the target she'd hit dead center. She pulled out her grandfather's dog tags, holding them tightly. "We did it, Shimasani," she whispered in Navajo. "Together we did it. Your teachings, your wisdom, your way of seeing the world, they brought me here. They made this possible. I walked in beauty, just like you taught me, and I'll keep walking that path, wherever it leads." A wind gust moved across the range, carrying with it the scent of distant rain, of earth and grass, of endless possibility. Kai smiled, feeling her grandfather's presence like sunshine on her face. She'd won a championship, but more importantly, she'd honored a legacy, carried forward a tradition, and proven that excellence knows no boundaries, of race, gender, or expectation. The competition was over. But Kai Yazzi's journey was just beginning.